Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I was on a trip recently to western Wisconsin. This was near the Illinois border, not too far from Iowa as well, in a place called Monroe, Wisconsin. I stopped in there. We were there for a different purpose, but we stopped into an antique store that was just about to close when I was there just to see if I could find something. And the most of the store did not have sports-related items apart from one section that had a ton of Packer stuff. But it was like stuff that really wasn't of interest to mine because it wasn't like sports cards or autographs and things like that. It was like posters and things. But I did find this little tray that had a bunch of different things from the White Sox from the 1950s, probably from a season ticket holder because they had a lot of things in there for season ticket renewals. And as I dug in a little bit deeper, I found a copy of the 1959 World Series program. This would have been the one that actually would have been handed out at Comiskey Park as opposed to the one that was handed out at the LA Coliseum, which is a different program, but has some of the same features on the inside. And I was able to work with the dealer to kind of get it down to a price where I felt it was probably best valued at, just because there's a lot of water damage on here. And as I go through here, you'll see that it looked like something ran over it a few times. But other than that, the pages are intact. It's not missing any pages. So we can kind of go through and look at the World Series program, which is really cool. This is one I wanted to be able to pick up at some point in my collection. So let me center this a little bit so you can see everything and see the advertising on both sides. Oh, so it's got the Major League executives on here. Joe Cronin, obviously, a former Hall of Fame baseball player, being one of them, but a couple different other Hall of Famers are featured on here as executives. It's got some advertisements through most of it. Like here's her early win. It talks about the front office of the White Sox, which was kind of interesting because we got a picture of Hank Greenberg, who was part of the front office at this time underneath Bill Veeck, and Charles A. Comiskey, who was a descendant, obviously, of Charles Comiskey. And then you look at the American League champions. So it kind of breaks down their teams. Oops, missing a page. Starting with their coaching staff, with Al Lopez featuring at the top here. And then it moves on to their roster for the World Series. So early win, I'll point out some of the Hall of Famers and stars is featured right up here in the corner. Who they acquired for Minnie Minoso when he was traded over to the Indians the season before. So then we also have Bill Pierce, not a Hall of Famer, but an all-time great White Sox. Then we have the position players, starting with the catcher, Sherm Lawler, being the most noted one on the page here. I just love kind of looking at some of the old ads for things that I kind of went through here, kind of seeing like things that no longer exist kind of featured throughout here. And there's one I'll point out to you when I get to it that I thought was pretty interesting. Here we got Hall of Famers Luis Aparicio and Nellie Fox, their shortstop and the second baseman. Luis Aparicio is still with us. Nellie Fox has been gone for a while, and he was the 59 MVP that season. Here's where you can see it got ran over or something. Look, there's tire marks here, which caused the page to kind of crinkle a little bit, but it's still legible. Ted Kluszewski, who came over to the White Sox during this season. Okay, and we got, moving on to the rest of the infield, we got Norm Cash, his only season with the White Sox before he got moved on to the Tigers, where he's most known, being a good player. Here's our outfielders, Jim Landis, Jungle Jim Rivera. Al Smith, as I mentioned earlier, he was the one where you could see the famous picture of the 59 World Series where he was tracking a home run ball to the fence, was unable to make a play on it, and a beer got dumped on his head. That's a pretty famous image from that World Series, and it's Al Smith actually getting the beer dumped on his head as the fans are trying to reach and catch the ball as it's coming into the stands. Here we go. We've got an image from the Sports Illustrated in August 10th, 1959. Here they did a little image on here, at least highlighting the Go-Go, because they were the Go-Go White Sox. I think I'll need to get a copy of that Sports Illustrated at some point to go with this because it goes pretty well. There's a lot of cigarette advertising we go through here, unfortunately, but it was a sign of the times, including some restaurants that are no longer exist. Here's a picture of the White Sox at Comiskey Park. Talks about Inland Steel, who's still in high production at that time on the southeast side of Chicago. A couple more advertisements. So this one I thought was interesting. It's Tony Pete's Pontiac. So he was a player that played briefly for them in the 1930s. He's actually featured in the Diamond Star set. But what I really liked about this is it's got the White Sox uniform I really like on there, which has the bat and the ball with the Sox written over it. I just think that's such a cool image. from a team that was just really bad in the 1930s. But oddly enough, the team right now is much worse than those teams in the 1930s. Here we got the full roster for the White Sox. Listed down here, all the guys that we just talked about earlier. And where they lived during the wintertime as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. Got a couple of people who stay in Chicago, but a lot of other people didn't, even at this time. They lived elsewhere. All right, here's the scorecard. It wasn't filled out, which is kind of cool, even though it would have been cool too if you saw the names on here, because you could tie it to a specific game. And it has the rosters for the two teams for the World Series. And we'll do the Dodgers in a minute because that's featured in here as well. Here we got the official family of the Dodgers, starting with Walter O'Malley. Hero in LA, villain in Brooklyn. And we got the Dodger Brain Trust with Walt Alston up here. Pee Wee Reese was the coach on that team by that point. Good old Charlie Dreesen was still at the club. And here we have the pitchers, starting with Don Drysdale, Johnny Padres, Johnny Clipstein, Larry Sherry, who I think was the World Series MVP, if I'm not mistaken. Sandy Koufax, Roger Craig, John Roseboro. We got some more of the infield players, starting with Gil Hodges, Charlie Neal. Maury Wills was on the roster by this point. Future MVP, Jim Gillian. Good old Don Zimmer. And the outfielders, Duke Schneider, Carl Furillo, Wally Moon, hitting his moon shots at that time. Here's the history of the World Series, at least the previous appearances by the White Sox. So there's a little write-up about the initial team that made the World Series in 1906, who beat the Chicago Cubs. A little bit of write-up of the team in 1917 that won the World Series. At this point was the last team to have won the World Series. So it was 42 years when the White Sox appeared in the World Series in 1959 since they actually won one, and 40 years, because they talk about the 1919 team briefly here too, since they were in the World Series. Oddly enough, they don't mention about the players being suspended in this write-up in here, so I don't know if it was still like kind of a topic that was a little bit forbidden to kind of talk about in White Sox lore at this point, but it obviously had a big impact on the club, as it was terrible during the 1920s and 30s, as the team was definitely felt the effects of losing all those players because the roster was greatly depleted. But kind of interesting that was not mentioned as I kind of read that one. Got a picture of the 1959 Dodgers. And just a lot of advertisements for the most part. Talks about the World Series winners and their shares that they would want as players, which I think is kind of interesting too. So the winning share for the very first World Series for the winners was just over $1,100. The loser was, I'm not sure how, but they got $1,300. That must be a typo in some ways. Maybe it was supposed to be flip-flopped. We can see it was like not a lot of money for the winners, with a few exceptions where they had like larger attendance. Like here in 1954, it was a little bit larger, but we had the Polo Grounds, and also the stadium in Cleveland held a lot more fans, so they were able to sell a lot more tickets. This is when the shares were very dependent upon their attendance. Obviously, since then, they're kind of negotiated before even the World Series is played of what the winners and losers shares will be. But these were like greatly influenced by attendance at that time. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it talks a little bit about the total receipts or attendance for the World Series. And you look at back in 1954, it was, here it is. I think I'm looking at it right. Oh, that's the attendance, I believe, at, I'm not sure. Actually, it was because it was a sweep. It looks like it was not a hugely attended because it went 4 games in that one. But anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to be able to look that up. And here was kind of funny. You can see, here's the all-star selections for the White Sox through 1959. Starting with the 33 game, which had Dykes and Simmons, followed by Dykes and Simmons again and Simmons again. But most recently in 59, you had 5 White Sox that made the World Series, or made the all-star team, and later on went to the World Series. It was Fox, Aparicio, Wynn, Pierce, and Lawler, 3 of which are actually members of the Hall of Fame, and 1 of which has been up on Veterans Committees a few times, and that was Billy Pierce. But I thought the part was really kind of funny is you can get World Series souvenirs available. So save up your pennies, guys, and get in your time machine, because you could have gotten an autographed baseball from an American or National League team for $3. $3, you could have gotten an autographed baseball of the White Sox or the Dodgers. I bet there probably were like secretary signed balls or something like that, so it may not have been the players, but wouldn't that be funny if it actually was, and you picked up like the Dodger ball and it's got like Zimmer on there, some guys that have been passed, but like Koufax, Drysdale, some of these other names, Hodges, Schneider. That'd have been pretty interesting, as well as even the White Sox ball at that time. But that's about it. You know, here's the last couple pages. Nice ad for Cracker Jacks on here. A couple more ads here. And then in the back, kind of talks about advertisement for a washing machine company. At that point, that was a locally owned company. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, it didn't cost much, so you never know what you might find in an antique store. If you kind of look around, you can find bits of baseball history or sports memorabilia history that maybe once was forgotten or lost in somebody's collection that can be found again because of the work that's done by some of these antiquers and retailers that then put it up later for sale. So have a great day, everybody.